And good evening and welcome to City Focus. I'm Marty Olsen, your host, and tonight I'd like to welcome back my friend and yours, Tony D'Angelo. And Tony, it's always fun to have you make the trek in from the northeast corner of the state and come to the studio and chat for an hour.
It's always fun to get down here and see what's happening and see what civilization looks like. It's they keep me caged these days.
Well, you know, you do your phone interviews each week with Lee Elsey, the voice of freedom on 94.9, and you're on Tuesdays at 7 o'clock for a half an hour. And I always try to squeeze in as much of your time with him as I can before I get into work. And you always have a good litany of topics to talk about.
I try to keep it to what, and believe me, there's a lot of fine contributors out there, but I try to give people something that they may not get elsewhere. And that could either hit me like, bang, hey, this is great, or I'll struggle, because I think that's important. You know, I'm a great believer in the First Amendment and great believer in a wide variety of viewpoints. And I like to make myself think, and if I can make somebody think and look at something perhaps a different way, or maybe reinforce the way they're looking at it, or whatever, but just trying very hard to give that perspective of something that you're not going to get elsewhere. That to me is important.
Well, I think what's critically important, especially in today's day and age, is that that you are able to bring your thoughts into the public for
sure. How treasured that is.
Without being canceled, I guess is the term of the day.
How treasured that is. And this is where, in fact, I think we were talking about this Tuesday show. Actually, that would have been yesterday. I'm at the age now I have to count the days. And where the whole thing of moderation of thought and social media and people, and you look at some things, it's like, yeah, you really have to put a stop to it. But the problem, Marty, then becomes who does the moderating and for what, and who decides what is good, what is not good, what is, and as far as I'm concerned, throw it out there, let people make up their own minds. If your argument to that is better or contrary to what they're giving, it should stand on its own. You don't feel that you have to, quote unquote, micromanage and compress everything. My view, for what it's worth.
Well, I mean, that, as we were discussing just a few moments ago before we came on the air over dinner, I mean, I'm currently reading a book by Jonathan Turley, the law professor at George Washington University and a regular contributor on Fox News. He's written a book, Freedom of Speech in an Age of Rage, and we certainly are. And,
right.
And he takes this kind of the concept back to the beginning, and you had mentioned England and how their perception of things and ours is quite a bit different, at least in theory. Although in practice, the U.S. government and many of our leaders have been just as guilty as the Brits and many others in trying to squelch freedom of speech.
And what you're seeing now with Keir Starmer and the whole debate is this is the model of what censorship would look like. You can talk about how wonderful censorship is, and you could talk about why we need it and why we need. Folks, this is what's going to happen if you squelch it. And I'm not saying, like I mentioned to Lee yesterday, I'm not saying I have the exact great solution, but I can only tell you that ain't it. That's not going to work.
Well, I mean, over the last 8 years, the level of pressure that's been put on Donald Trump and his supporters has been extraordinary.
No doubt.
And it dovetails nicely into your concept of, this is what it'll look like when you're seeing things suppressed. Who's making these decisions that this is, illegal speech? Who's making these decisions? And, it's the people who are in power.
Well, that's pretty much it. What can government block? Government can block anything it feels like blocking, and then it's a question of who's doing the blocking and for what. I mean, is it God help us the day when someone like George Soros starts? He's picking up so many radio stations now on the cheap, and it's like, well, why not pick them all and then let's censor whatever the commentators, the show hosts say, and then you have absolutely positively nowhere to turn, and that's not America. I mean, America, we should hear all the voices, and anything in the least way that curtails that is dangerous. Now it's like, well, it's hate, it's rage, and on and on and on. Well, that's why we have tort law. It's you can have an opinion. That doesn't give you the right to exercise your opinion on someone else's head. But yet the politician, I hate to use that term, who wants to be the protector of us all thinks, well, I can do this for the benefit of all people. And if you think you can, look to see what's happening in Britain, and then go and tell me, why you think you know so much more than John F. Kennedy, all the 3 Supreme Court cases, and the what's happening in Britain. That your solution is going to be the solution. And if this wasn't such a serious subject, I'd be laughing my brains off, frankly.
Well, it's interesting in terms of how, and I'm about halfway through Turley's book. And,
yeah.
We look at historically the Boston Tea Party as a heroic exercise, but you could flip the coin, and it would be insurrection.
For sure.
And it should have been shut down, and all the perpetrators should have been thrown into prison.
And that's really a good operative question. Our station, 94.9, I was playing, I don't listen all the time, and I'm not a great fan, nor am I a detractor of Sean Hannity. Good host, keeps it moving, but a caller had called up and asked him, Sean, when does the time come, to your point about the Boston Tea Party, when you've just got to chuck the government and just start fighting against it for what they're doing? And not that I expected Sean to have an answer to that, but what scares me, I think, is that moment is coming closer and closer and closer when we see the failings of government and what government cannot do for a myriad of reasons. Does that mean government is horrible? Well, in many ways it is, but there's a whole lot of other reasons that brought it to this point that, frankly, bad government had nothing to do with.
Yeah, well, again, Turley gives an awful lot of examples going back, even back to the Greeks,
right,
and coming up through in the Romans and into our own here in the U.S. and the New World, and it's interesting. It's an interesting read, and to kind of evaluate and look at things, and in some instances, probably some issues that. Maybe you haven't given much consideration to. You've only gotten a paragraph in a history book, maybe in high school.
For sure. And he's a guy, from what I understand, is not necessarily a Trump fan.
He's not.
He's a professor. He believes in the rule of law.
Yeah. So, but I respect him. He's a guy,
yeah.
When he comes on, I'm interested in what he has to say in his evaluation.
Because without just whatever you want to call it, the basic premises of law and reason, you have chaos. Now, if you go back to, Barry Obama, we've got to take this thing to bare metal and set up a brave new world and that sort of thing. And me, myself, and I just have a problem with, do they really want to just torch everything and have this utopia of, Marxism or garbage and there's enough people that want to do that. And it's like, but two things they don't realize, Marty, is number one, the fact that they're able to speak is granted to them by the Constitution. And it's like, once you've destroyed everything, what are you going to do? And it's just, it's pitiful.
But with Obama, though, I mean, I view him as a globalist.
Yeah.
He, in his mind, the ideal government would be global in nature, and you'd have kind of almost of a 1984 vision where you've got these spheres of influence with some powers to be, and of course he would be one of them.
Very much so, yeah.
And they would rule because they know better.
And you had better listen to them, and shame on you if you don't agree with them. Yeah.
I mean,
sure.
and then you see with the Democratic vice presidential candidate to be Governor Walz, during COVID, where he's got neighbors and family members ratting out their other friends and neighbors.
He is one scary
sneaky
man.
Bastard.
Yeah, he is Ned Lamont with boldness and courage of his twisted convictions. Ned would not get to that point, not to that degree. Ned is the kind of guy you could get to goad him to a certain point, but when it got away from his own, shall we say, feeder system or his creature comforts, he wouldn't. He's got it too good. He's got it too cushy. Walz would just as soon burn down his own house for the cause, and that's, to me, he's a very scary man.
Yeah, I mean, I think a question that I've been asked frequently in my tenure in local politics, primarily, all the politicians, they're the same. Republicans, Democrats, they. And I say, well, not really. I mean, in a sentence, or the abridged version, I mean, the Democrats are looking for equal outcomes,
right?
And the Republicans are looking to have equal opportunity, and there's a huge difference there. And now it's masked under the acronym of DEI.
DEI and equity.
That is equal outcomes. And it's ironic that within our lifetime, I mean, going back to Martin Luther King and into the late 60s and into the 70s, where the fight was for equal opportunity.
Give me a place at the table. Yeah, give me a chance to do as well as I'm able and willing to do.
So I mean, I think it's rather ironic that it seems like we're going backwards at the moment.
We are, and well, look at it this way. If you were as you say, Obama, a globalist, a controlling person, a person that wants your way to be the way, you want to make things as difficult as possible for people who aren't like you. You want to remove their means of sustaining themselves. The thing where I think, especially Republicans nationally and locally, they wear this equally, were horrible at COVID, is when the Democrat governors started to assault industries. And, and I keep saying this, and this offends politicians, but basically a Ned Lamont or an Andrew Cuomo or a Phil Murphy or Tim Walz, these guys aren't that bright. They can't design something like that. Enter McKinsey, enter Boston Consulting Group, enter the Ivy Leaguers who, can do the neat graphics, can do the statistical studies. Now, of course, just about all of that went to pot, but think of it. What did they assault? Churches. Can't go to church, right? Can't have enough, it's, Pritzker at one point, he heard there was 25 people in a church and he wanted to break the door down. Newsom tried to shut congregations in California, but how do humble people, not everybody can go to college like you did or I did. It's not everybody has that inclination, not everybody's able. But what do they go after? Restaurants, right? Very, very, very good vehicle for people who maybe didn't go to Harvard, but can make a lot of money and build things by equity and learning, and best business people in the world. The only way you could take the business away from is government shutting it down. The other thing is real estate. Do you want to be a landlord in the state of Connecticut? I'd rather you took me out on Route 32 and ran me over 6 times with your Prius. You'd have to be crazy. But this is where they shot. And you want to tell me that this wasn't intended? These are the Trump supporters. These are the guys that want to see a free America, and without government control. They want to make their money and stay out of trouble and raise their families, and that's, what's wrong with that?
Sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah, me too. That's why they threw us out of the restaurant. But anyway.
Listen, I mean, the thing is that regarding Trump, I mean, you got to get by his personality, and you got to evaluate action and what he was able to accomplish. When you look at the term he has served and what he was able to accomplish and what was thrown at him, it's flabbergasting how much he was able to achieve. Think about what he may have been able to achieve if he was didn't have all those obstacles, and also having a little modicum of support within his own party. The party leadership was certainly out cutting him off at the knees as well.
And we've talked about it. I think he could have managed himself a little better. I think he could have chose better people. I think he could have. He could have been, and I don't think that was like an egregious failing, which probably you wouldn't have noticed if all the other things lined up. But the sad thing with him is I think he grossly underestimated the evil in Washington, and he grossly underestimated really the evil power of Nancy Pelosi, who you think, oh, she's just a dingbat. She's just what is she even doing there? Look at what she did. She held up the COVID relief money. She absolutely positively stuffed his best people, Robert Lighthizer, Steve Mnuchin, Larry Kudlow. They were babysitting her to the point where they were just incredibly ineffective. And that was, and he would make jokes about her and things. While he was doing that, she was tearing his eyes out. And I hope he's learned those lessons, if in the hope and that he gets
the
back there. Yeah, and that's right now he's the best choice. He may not be a perfect choice, but he's the best choice. But that's my and that was really, that hurt him.
Yes, it did. And I hurt him in his re-election bid, and it's, to a degree, the fallout is still hurting him now.
It's still hurting him now. Yeah, that and over-trusting your family. I can give a couple of shows on that and what that can.
Well, the irony of it is, I mean, back with JFK, he leaned heavily on his family, his brother Bobby in particular.
That was an interesting dynamic, though, because you look at it, the people that were the, shall I say, the trusted people that were with him, Hoover, Dulles, like these are the people you've got to rely on. Those are the people that were constantly trying to stab him in the back, and his loyal foot soldiers were, Bobby and Teddy. Yeah, it can't go the other way. You're absolutely right.
Folks, you're watching City Focus, and I'm Marty Olsen, your host. I'm joined tonight by Tony D'Angelo. And for those of you who don't know Tony, he's, I would say, a very sharp and on top of his game, and I'll say it, critic of primarily the state government. He follows what's going on in Hartford with an eagle eye, and he offers a commentary in a number of ways. But where I met him, it was as weekly guest on Lee Elsey's Voice of Freedom on 94.9 FM every Tuesday morning. And I've said, this is a guy I want to get to know. And
It's very kind of you to extend yourself.
And to reach out. And he's been kind enough to come down from the northeastern part of Connecticut to be on the set here. Now, this is out of your third or fourth time here now, and it's
yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
And I really appreciate
I do too.
You do this, and actually tomorrow he will be my guest at the New London Kiwanis Club and be our guest speaker. So I'm looking forward to that. That'll be a little bit of an abridged version, but I have confidence that you will put together a splendid program.
I'm working on something. I hope everybody enjoys it.
Yeah. And just a quick plug regarding the Kiwanis Club. We do have our annual golf tournament coming up on Friday, September 20th. There we go. We've got it up on the screen. And that will be at Shinnecossett Municipal Golf Club in Groton. And you can, we need players and we need sponsors. We need raffle prizes, baskets, goodie bag stuffers. If you're a business person and you've got stuff that you'd like to put in there to advertise, would love to have it. And volunteers on game day, kit and caboodle. But it's the club's primary fundraiser. It supports all of our charitable work for each year. And everything goes back into the community. So we are very proud of that. We recently awarded three $3,000 scholarships to some local students going on to college this fall. And it gives you a little faith when you see how the quality of these kids coming out of high school.
They're the future.
That
They're the future.
It's not all as bad as the news has it laid out, that the kids are all a bunch of bottom feeders. We got some really top flight kids.
Yeah, they're the future. What little we can share with them for them to lead, productive and useful and honorable lives and lead others. I mean, that's basically what it comes down to.
Now, also in the news, and it certainly has gotten the attention of the aforementioned Lee Elsey, is I'm sure most of you have gotten your electric bill. And there's a new column in there for what's it, public
benefit, I believe.
Public benefit. So in essence, what that is, it's a fee that we're all being charged to pay for people who haven't been paying their electric bill for a period of time, and it's a rather significant increase in those folks who have been paying. I know Lee's been going nuts. And many others as well. But there doesn't seem to be any sense of urgency in the Assembly or in the Governor's office up in Hartford.
No, from what I understand, the PURA, the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority, if I've got that exactly right, passed another rate increase from Eversource to us as citizens. And you talk about doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. Welcome to Connecticut, but yeah.
But this is emblematic here in Connecticut as well, in terms of our capacity as a state to be competitive and attract business, attract investment.
If you have nothing to do, and this is something, it's one of my favorite sayings, and I say this to everybody, if you want raw news, now raw news is, a lot of it is junk, a lot of it's to be discarded, but if you really want to find out what's happening in a given place, go on Twitter and read about what people are saying about a certain thing. And if you see a trend developing with something, it's generally, if not always, very true. And because after a while, if there's crazy stuff, and there's a lot of crazy stuff, I get a lot of crazy stuff sent to me every day, and people won't make assertions on things which, honestly, I think 90% of them are correct, but they can't be proven. And I tell them, it's like, you've got to prove it better. Then they get angry with me, like I'm, pulling rank on them or something. But that all said, if you go and look to see what, hashtag Connecticut on Twitter, oh my Lord. I mean, a lot of things that, I mean, really that frankly are unmentionable. And so to your point, Marty, if I'm a business person, I'm thinking, well, who's got a good utility policy? Who's got a good energy policy? If I have an energy sensitive business where I can't go down, what's the dependability rate like? And. Somebody looking at that and seeing, the performance of Eversource and all the other issues, they won't come. Why would they? I mean, unless you hand them a big bribe to come, but that's not even being right for the wrong reasons. That's being wrong for the wrong reasons. And too long we've tried to do that in the state.
Well, in this morning's day paper, there was a op-ed piece by Chris Powell, and he writes for the Manchester Enquirer, I believe it is. And I enjoy when the day has his column in, because he's one of the few that I think is clear-headed with his writing that the day publishes. It tends to tack pretty hard to the left, and most of the stuff they publish I don't tend to agree with, although I do get the paper online because you got to kind of still have your finger on the pulse of what's going on, especially locally. But the headline is Connecticut isn't ready to prosper, and stop taxing electricity. And we're just getting started on the electricity here in terms of how that is affecting the climate in Connecticut and our future. And one thing that Powell indicates here is that we've got a severe housing shortage statewide. And with that, when there's a shortage, what does that do to prices?
Well, it's supply and demand.
Yeah, but what's it do to prices? Prices go up.
Yeah. One of the things as far as we have a housing shortage, I hear this. And then I say, well, why do we have a housing shortage? Because we have a very large outmigration in Connecticut. And affordable housing, yeah, I can see that. I can certainly see that. But yet to me, housing has always, at least historically, drive by any of the mills here. I think Norwich is a great example. You will see, Putnam's a great example of this, you'll see the mill and you'll see the mill housing. This is around 100 years ago. So what happened? The mill caused enough economic substance to come so the housing could be built. It happened organically. Government wasn't involved, subsidies weren't involved. These weren't housing projects, they just happened to go up because the people needed somewhere to live. And maybe if they saved their nickels, they could move a town away with a house with a lake or something like that. Now, that system worked just fine. And, here we are in Connecticut, and it's like, well, we need more housing, but yet who's going to go in the housing, and how will they pay the rent, Marty, if you don't have suitable employment? And how can you have suitable employment if you have no energy policy? And how can you have an energy policy if you're talking about, renewables all the time as your prime mover, which frankly are not really ready for prime time? And look, everything in this room.
They can't sustain themselves,
right.
The renewables.
Fuel product, right? Fuel product was brought here by a truck. Shh, I didn't tell you that. It's like, and then it's all going to be okay. Everything will be fine. And it's not. It's not. And
well, affordable housing, to me, it's an oxymoron. And I kind of get a kick out of those who advocate for this, because they tend to advocate for quote-unquote livable wages, which means higher wages.
right.
Higher wages tend to drive costs up and not down. As one who spent a good part of my adult life in home improvements and construction, the cost of a sheet of plywood is what it is, and a 2x4 is what it is. And the suppliers of building materials aren't lowering their prices.
Not because you asked them to.
For the purpose of creating affordable housing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in order to accomplish that goal requires government interference, you might say. It requires either tax abatements, tax breaks, subsidies, some sort of third-party initiative to bring the cost down.
Well, and what, it's tough explaining this to somebody under the age of 30, maybe even under the age of 40, but all of the great design in this state, you know, the gold standard was Cabrini Green in Chicago, which was the wonderful housing village. It'll be affordable, everything will be there. We'll put everything there for you, and ended up in a haze of guns and drugs and bullets and all that. Connecticut, Father Panic Village, Bridgeport, same thing. Southfield Village in Stamford, same thing. And the whole idea was that the failure was actually twofold. It was, Father Panic Village is a great example. It's like, well, you know, people, you'll pick up the Hartford Current, we're gonna have faith-based housing. That's great. And it's like, well, this is going to be okay because the faith community is involved. Well, they tried that 70 years ago in Bridgeport, and look at what happened. Because then it became a thing of, well, who cleans up the mess? I ain't cleaning up the mess. You cleaning up the mess. I'm not going to do it. So when that happens, you say, why? Number one, why did these things fail? And number two, why does this newer generation think that by repackaging the same thing, it's gonna, you know, it'll all be just fine because they know what they're doing and they're doing exactly what failed years ago. And where that argument ceases, let's just say, okay, I'll raise you and I'll grant you one more. We need affordable housing. Okay, all this stuff you read about, well, let's have these rentals. We're just going to build them. We're going to build them wherever they are. I mean, my Lord, I've got one 20 miles away from me in Yukon and skyscrapers in a cow pasture. It's like, well, can these people own these apartments? Can they have equity in them? Can they have a pride of ownership? Because if you own something, you want to take care of it. You want to have the value go up. You're going to meet with other neighbors. You're going to do what's best as far as management. You're going to look for somebody to maintain at a lower price, to plow the snow and things like that. And your hope is that you can sell it and get a little money and buy something a little bigger, in, you know, maybe in the same town or another. They won't answer that question. Meanwhile, in other words, have cooperatives rather than rentals. Co-op City in New York City, right, in the Bronx, 60 years it has been functioning as a cooperative community. It's apartments, it's, you know, whatever, it's workforce housing. It's certainly transit-oriented development. You can get every train there known to mankind. But the big thing is, people get to own their apartments and they get to sell their apartments. Yeah, there's income limits and things like that, but they're pretty generous income limits. And wait, I was looking at this actually for a piece I was doing, you know, on our show. A 2-bedroom apartment in Co-op City, the waiting list is 7 years. That's how badly people want to get in. But we're not, you see, the cloak of all of this is not, we need housing, we want to house these people. No, it's actually because these rents, when they come in, however they're going to get paid, aren't going to go to anything but the people owning these apartments, and they'll be sitting back collecting the rents. And it's like, hey, got a leaky faucet. That's nice, you got a leaky faucet. Well, hardware store's down over there. You know, it's like, when you see a failure and you could do very little to stop it, it is the most frustrating thing on earth, yeah, to me.
But a lot of the regulations that go into quote unquote creating affordable housing also ironically create part of the rising cost and shortages, which continually put pressure to raise prices.
Well, I'm very happy you mentioned that as well. For all the money that came into the state during COVID, and for all the money that was screwed up, messed over, lied about, pilfered, went off and whatever you want to call it, equities that were connected to the governor's family. Shh, I didn't tell you that either. But there was a large amount of money, I'd mentioned this on Lee's show a few years ago, that was for pandemic rent assistance. In other words, you can't pay your rent. There was a means of you going and knocking on the door and somebody flip you a few greenbacks. Literally, I understand trucks were going around, and you could pay your rent. And the amount of money, it's curiously, the whatever you want to call it, the endeavor was called Unite CT. And it's like, that's an odd name. Well, they were using software, and it's funny that Annie Lamont is invested in an equity, her equity partnership known as Unite Us. And it's like, well, I guess they weren't using the Lamont software, right? And then I understand there were issues with that. But that all said, I pulled up a spreadsheet of the, shall I say, the payments to the people who were asking for rent money. And Marty, I saw all this money for legal fees, accounting fees, I mean, in the millions of dollars. And it's like, why do all these legal, fees, why are all these people there? I mean, if you're forgiving the rent, does everybody have to go through an eviction proceeding? I mean, can't you just have like blanket amnesty? I mean, is this like a give back to the, it sure looked that way, to the politically connected law firms and accounting firms? Shh, I didn't tell you that either. And it's like, it's how many millions of dollars were wasted there? And it's just, so I do get, I'm sorry to be off on the soapbox, but I do get very suspect as to the motives.
Yeah, but I mean, one thing is the Biden administration this term has tried to force railroad, whatever term you'd like to use, renewable energy as a prime source of energy, be it solar, wind, etc., and get us off of fossil fuels. But as we speak, fossil fuels are still the most efficient, cost-effective, and these other industries are not even close to being self-sustaining.
Well, and I'm glad
to make a switch like this on a dime is again just driving cost up with energy sources that can't hack it.
And two comments to your point. Myself and I have been screaming about the introduction, ask Lee, of natural gas at least since the top of this year. The Republicans now are just saying it because it's, quote unquote, politically safe to do so. You can look as far as their energy plan, and it was, let's have a study to look. There's nothing to study, guys. You got to get the stuff working. It's an epidemic here. It's going to get bad if it's not already. But the other thing is, to the point of, the happy little green world, there is a very profitable truck plant, Chrysler plant, in Warren, Michigan. And it's, if you live in you're Eastern, you know what it's like. If you're in a, like a mill town and where there is a major industry. Now I'm Stanford. Stanford back then was Pitney Bowes. So went Pitney Bowes, so went Stanford back in those days. And certain mixed emotions about that to this day. But doing well. They've got a very good product, and there's a lot of these service trucks, and they're Dodge Ram trucks, and they're very popular, and they're selling, and people are doing well, and they're, they have their homes, and they're sending their kids to school, and they're buying groceries, and hey, this is all right. Now, the head of the UAW, Sean Fain, the guy's a flat out, you've had a lot of idiots in the automobile industry forever. But for the fact you've had government subsidies, it would have folded years. My brother was in that industry. But that all said, he is so tied into the green energy thing. We've got to have these green cars, and. He pressured Stellantis to sell e-cars and to manufacture e-cars and to stop production of the gas-powered trucks, which were both useful, profitable, and they do good things. They bring materials and they employ people. And this whole town, Warren, Michigan, is going to go the way of bad pun, the Edsel, because they don't have their industry anymore. But yet, we're saving society for green power. And of course, if you're building cars, it's like, don't tell anybody. You have these little African children going into the mines that are putting the minerals out, dragging the minerals out, losing limbs and things like that. But hey, that's okay if you're, eco. I'm not against e-cars, but I think
But it ought to be a choice.
let the market determine it, Marty.
Yeah. Not a mandate, but a choice.
Yeah. Let the market, and when the product is better, I thought the discussion the other night with President Trump and Elon Musk, which they tried to sabotage, was just a great discussion by two very intelligent, thoughtful men who were giving their best to the discussion. And Trump said to Elon Musk, it's like, well, I think you can develop a car that's solar powered. Great thought. Wouldn't that be great? You wouldn't have to visit a gas station ever again. But we don't think about that because we're not allowed to think. We get dictated to by political forces, and I'm being very polite. Family show and all that.
Well, it's interesting times we're in. I mean, I
For
tell
sure.
you, we have I think a clear choice moving forward this November in terms of the direction that we'd like to see our country moving forward, whether it's what I would perceive to be as a continual slide towards socialism, or worse, or an attempt at a correction to move back towards where merit counts.
I think two things are certain, and neither one of them is good. The first thing is whoever loses the election will say it was rigged. That's a given. Get ready for that. I understand the thing of too big to rig, but it'll be, even if it's a Trump landslide, which I do not think it'll be, there'll be a lot of push me, pull you and questions, and more things you see now as far as voting machine manipulation, which frankly are just, they're voluminous, in cases that are being brought like in Arizona and being successfully litigated. Won't be in time for November, but that'll happen. It'll be this period of who won, and then whoever gets into power, whosoever gets into power, you're going to have a lot of pushback by the other side, just speaking very generically. And I just don't think it's going to be a very happy time as such. Now, I, like you, I do not want to see socialism. I do not want to see government dictating to citizens, because that hasn't worked anywhere in the history of the world. Why is it going to work now? Basically.
Yeah, and that's where, again, globalism dovetails into that as well.
Oh, sure does.
It's not just, it's ironic where, the U.S. has built itself to where it is, based on doing things and creating and talent and merit and making things happen, not having the some bureaucrat say, well, we're going to have 6 rolls of toilet paper,
Well,
and 7 cars, and they're going to have this engine, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and and all that has produced is shortages and angst, to be polite and kind.
well, yeah, and incredibly. And I mean, it's not, I catch the thing from people of, you hate the government. And yeah, to a certain extent I do. I don't hate government. I hate what government has become, like the way a lot of things have been. I love education. The educational system is bad. It's been corrupted in many ways, but not all of it, not all of education is bad. But that all said, the government can be very good at setting a goal. Now, John F. Kennedy was great at that. He said, we're going to go to the moon, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And this is what, and in doing that, we will raise up the sights of people. Government leaders and government could set a bar and then encourage others to meet it. What we get is, Biden going around with somebody ghost driving an EV for him saying, this is the car you will make. And, with predictable result, both his presidency and the cars that they're making, which no one wants. And this is, I guess what happens in Russia when everybody drives a Volga. And even so, I think the Volgas will start up because they run on fuel, but it's just that's the part that where I think liberals really miss it.
Yeah. But with capitalism, I mean, people aspire to improve, and competition demands improvement, because
right.
Otherwise you get left behind.
It's,
what the socialist globalists are doing is trying to get everybody to kind of dumb down, where everybody's at a plateau here as opposed to striving to be here.
well, and capitalism is far from perfect, and people will leverage it, and they will.
People get left behind. It's not perfect.
It's right, but yet you have to ask yourself, what can I do not to be left behind? And it's there will never be a utopia. It can't happen. Sir Thomas More tried that, and the best he could say is, well, we set a very good goal here, but it failed. Henry Ford's a great example of that. Look at what happened at Fordlandia, the tire plant. He thought, well, hey, I guess he had a feud with Firestone. And for whatever reason, they were friends, and then they had a falling out. Heck with you, I'll go to Brazil and I'll make my own tires. And he got all the Brazilian people, and he said, this is what you will do. We will give you perfect conditions, and you will assemble the tires, and we'll give you free housing, we'll give you free food, you'll have movies every night, and you can have a wonderful society, and isn't life going to be great? So one night, I guess somebody got a meal they didn't like, and they started torching the place. It doesn't, utopia will never, ever, ever. I mean, the apostles fought, right? I mean, Peter, James, and John all went their separate ways. It's just, people will go their own ways and not.
So Milton Hershey tried to create a,
yes, he did.
The utopian company town.
Yeah.
And, on paper, and it looked perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But humans aren't perfect.
No, and the other one, I think maybe.
I mean, and even in the Depression, when he wasn't laying anybody off, people got upset.
That's right. That's right. The other thing is, I know we have Christian people and church people that watch us. Is there was a fella in the '80s, Jim Baker.
Yes.
And with the PTL, and what Jim Baker thought that he could make the Christian community and make it beautiful, and there'd be no smoking, no drinking, no this, no that, and have an amusement park. And people I know went there and said it was an incredibly beautiful amusement park, and they loved it, and they had a great time. But the problem was that you cannot build heaven on earth without making, an acceptance for some kind of failure, and just keep moving forward. Not everybody's going to catch that bar. That's the sad thing. Yeah.
So, but again, I think that we are looking at some critical times here in the next few months in the direction that we go. The slippage the last 4 years has been staggering, and I just never thought I'd live to see the U.S. in the situation that we're currently in. I mean, our foes, whether it be Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, or wherever else on the globe. But the big boys their primary interest is global dominance. They're not worried about a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with.
No, and they don't play personalities. In America, the whole thing with politics today is personalities. It's I don't like him. Well, it's not a case of whether you like him. It's the thing is if he's there or she's there. If
you hurt my feelings.
You hurt my feelings. Or,
well, grow up.
Yeah. It's really the sad thing. And what do we look for in government? I can tell you, it's fix the roads, protect the land, watch the borders, Give me a favorable tax policy. Police where necessary, but give people enough of an incentive where they'll look out for themselves. And I mean, government is just taking too much of a place in society, and that's the whole thing, where people have always, now it's this dependency on the government, and I think both parties are guilty of that to varying degrees, and to our detriment.
Well, we're getting down to our last handful of minutes here.
It goes so
Whenever
fast.
you come down here, the time
You have all these plans and I
absolutely-
completely blow them on you.
You know, I was just thinking, I jotted down a name. You know, when you were talking about a few minutes ago, when this is all over, whoever comes up on the short end is going to be pointing the finger. You know, the left has been absolutely brutal in their attacks on Trump for not knuckling under and saying, well, I lost. But they don't hold their own accountable, such as Hillary Clinton, who has never, or Stacey Abrams down in Georgia, and others. But those two come to mind quickly, that it's okay for them to deny that they lost.
Well, and I think
but for Trump, I mean, he's the devil reincarnate.
I think a lot of that is really, whether they realize it or not, is the teachings of Saul Alinsky. Lie, deny, and unfortunately after that it's die. And that's, you know, I think in their lying, like we were talking about Adam Schiff on the way over here, and how Steve Garvey's not getting traction in California. And it's because of this whole thing of Schiff has it in his, I will continue to lie because when I'm lying, it doesn't matter. I'm doing God's work. And that's basically, and that's a problem with a lot of people on the left. You will not succeed by continually putting out the wrong answer, because someday you'll end up on the wrong end of it. And then you're really going to, you'll see what it's like. It's not going to be fun.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I wanted to just get your thoughts quickly in our remaining moments, too. We did have a primary in the state of Connecticut yesterday. I was a moderator at a local school in London, and the turnout was, it was a Republican primary, I might add. We had more Democrats come out than they couldn't vote.
You had to turn them away.
I had to turn them away. This is a Republican primary, but at the Nathan Hill School in the south end of the city, we had 14 Republican electors who exercised their franchise to vote for the U.S. Senate candidates, and I think we had 15 or 16 Democrats, so we had to say, sorry, but you'll have to come back in November. And the two Republican candidates were vying for the opportunity to challenge the incumbent U.S. Senator Chris Murphy. And I think he will be a formidable.
Well, and we were discussing this in the restaurant. Here's my thought, but of course nobody listens to me, let alone Republicans. As I've said often, the most thick-headed people in the world are Republican advisors and Catholic, and I've been both. Okay? But if it's me, Marty, I am on the phone to Trump Central, if I'm Matt Corey, the primary winner, or anybody in the state GOP, and saying, have Donald Trump come here, because number one, it is 6 electoral votes. That means something in a very tight election. Look at 1968, we were discussing that, and that all hinged on Connecticut. The other thing is that Trump can do a much better job as president if he can somehow get rid of Chris Murphy. And wouldn't we all be better? Wouldn't that all be a better world for us? You know, it's like the signs in the old IBM buildings used to say, think. Well, think, people. Think. Think.
Touché.
Expand your mind.
All righty.
Let's see if we make it out of the building tonight.
All right. Based upon what I saw when we drove in, I think we're safe. But Tony, I want to thank you for
Thank you,
for
Marty.
coming in tonight.
A pleasure.
And,
Thank
look
you for
forward to
having
seeing
me.
you tomorrow.
Yeah, it'll be a lot
at
of
the
fun.
New London Kiwanis Club. Folks, you've been watching City Focus. We'll be back again next week. And with that, we'll say good night.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for having me.